Good evening. So let's wait for a few more to join. So we were dealing with the CBSE Computer Science, and we have been looking into Python for the last couple of days. So we'll just wait for one more minute and then we'll commence the class. Yes, it's time to start. Let's start it. Let me just make a preparation here. Okay, then. A very good evening. Very good evening to everybody. Welcome to Unacademy and welcome to my class. So, before going into our class and details on Unacademy, let me give you a brief introduction. A self introduction. So, hello, I am Shalini. I'm a teacher by profession with over 14 years of teaching experience. I'm a BTech and MTech graduate in computer science and engineering. With Unacademy, I'm excited to provide an inspiring learning experience to the students via this online platform. To all those students whom I could not have enlightened either using the offline or classroom teaching. So, as you all know, Unacademy is the most happening app today because it is not only for a school going student but for an aspirant preparing for a competitive examination. So, be it anything, you get all the courses. It is like a one stop destination for you for all these courses and for the preparations. So, it has grown to be the India's largest e learning platform. Okay. So, now, what you get in an academy is the daily live classes, okay, and all the courses here are well structured. That means they are in line with the current examination syllabus, and there are live tests and quizzes which would help you to understand your how well you're preparing for the examination. And on a subscription, you get unlimited access to all the classes, okay. So, in the daily life classes, chat with your educator. You get an opportunity to chat with your educator, engage in discussions, ask your doubts, and answer via polls. Now, all the facilities would are available while the live class is going on. Okay. So you needn't worry if you miss out a live class also, because once you get subscribed to Unacademy, you are eligible, or you get access to not only the live class but also the recorded versions of the same class, which can be viewed at the comfort of your time and as well as your device. Okay. So the structured courses means all the courses are in line with the current examination syllabus. So this would help you to prepare for the exam better. Okay. Now there are also criteria and which help you to give you an analysis of your performance and how well you're preparing towards the examination. Now these are via taking the live test and quizzes that comes in Unacademy, and to avail all these services for the one-stop solution, I would recommend all of you to subscribe to Unacademy and get the unlimited access to all the live and recorded courses in Unacademy. Okay, so this is how the comprehensive syllabus would look like. You would have the different subjects, and underneath each of the subject, you would have the courses listed, right? So it is not just a particular educator. You get the courses of all the educators available in an academy taking all the courses. Now, so this is the Unacademy Learning app. Now you can download the Learning app, download and install in your smartphones. So what you need to download, you be very sure about it. It should be the Unacademy Learning app, and then get the subscription according to your choice. Okay. So apart from the app, there is a Telegram channel too. What you just need to do is download the Telegram app in your smartphones, and you see the link here that is being listed in the slide. Okay. What you need to do is just type this link on the URL as shown in the figure and then click to join, so that you get added up in the Telegram channel and get access to the study materials posted by the different educators. Okay. Now, this is in detailed about the subscription fees of Unacademy for the class 12 students, CBSE students. Okay. So the plan shows from ranging from a month to a year subscription. Okay. So if you are a 11th grade student or in class 11, I would suggest you to go for the 12-month or a year subscription. And if you are a in class 12 students, then definitely at least you should take a subscription of 6 months duration, so that you can have a systematic study along with your schoolwork, if you could follow with Unacademy. Now the plan says from a month to 12 months. Okay. And for the on the across each of the plan, the price ranges are also listed, ranging from 2,500 to 12,500. But if you avail my promo code, if you use my promo code SLYT, I repeat, if you use my promo code SLYT, you get a discount of 10% on the fee. Okay, so it is in fact a reduction. So a fee that would cost you around 2,500 upon applying the promo code would benefit you by 10%. That means it would cost you only 2,250. Okay. So likewise, a reduction can be seen in all the following plans below also, right? So I would recommend all of you to take a subscription and then enjoy the facilities availed to you by Unacademy for your preparation. Right. So moving on to our lessons, as I told you, we're dealing with the CBSE Class 12th Computer Science, and we have been learning Python as per the NCRT syllabus. And for the last couple of days, we were looking into the different constructs and concepts in the language. And we have started with the topic of functions in Python. Okay. And today we are in the part 4. So we had learned about the definition of functions, what a function call is, what a function definition is. Okay. then the terminologies, arguments and parameters, then how to pass the values. Okay, now all these things we have seen in detail, and how the mapping also happens. Now today we are going to learn something different. Okay, so today we'll be looking more into all these things. So here we'll be looking into the different. First we'll see the contents, and then we'll go into detail of what we are going to look for the day. So the contents of today's lesson would cover the scope rules, okay, the scope of the variables, and along with the scope of the variables we'll be learning what are the two kinds of scope permissible in language Python. Okay, now what exactly is the terminology lifetime of a variable means, and how to resolve the scope of a name or a name source, okay, namespace. Now all these things that we'll be looking into in detail in today's lesson. So let's start. Okay. So let us first define each of them, and then we'll look into the in detail using examples of code fragment. Okay. So let us see what are scope rules. Okay. So the definition says the scope rules of a language. Okay. So here we are not just speaking about a programming language, but a language in general. So the scope rules of a language are the rules that decide in which parts of the program a particular piece of code or data item would be known and can be accessed therein. Okay. Now, when the definition was stated, it is stating with respect to a programming language or a program. Okay. So, when you're considering a program, what happens? We are considering a part of the program, or say for a data item included inside your program. Okay. Now, the rules or the scope rules would tell you or would let you know for a particular data item where and all it is known or can be accessed or used. Who knows you? Okay. Now, imagine we'll see a example. Okay. Now, let us take an example of an individual. Say the name of that individual is ABC, and this particular person is residing in a place named DEF. Okay, so this is his residence, and maybe he is working in an office which is named XYZ. Okay, so this particular ABC would have another friend circle also, right? Now let's name the friend circle to be say PQR. Okay, so we have the different areas where this ABC would be interacting, or this particular person is going to interact. Now, when you're telling about the scope, now in the he would be available at weekends at his home. He would be available on weekdays at his office, and maybe in the evening time with his friends, or on holidays with his friends. Now, in this case, we can separate and say a particular person would be available or accessible, reachable at which and all days, at which and all places. Okay. So, if you are asked about where would be this person on a particular day, remembering all these criteria, you could say the scope rules. Okay. Or from where and all you can access this particular person named ABC. Is the idea clear? So, when you're considering a person, and when you're considering a timetable of where he could be on weekdays, where he could be on weekends, and maybe in the during the daytime, maybe during the evening time. Now, based on this, you can define a set of scope rules for this particular person, right? Now, imagine the whole thing or the whole idea to be carried over to a program. Now, in the case of a program, the data item or a piece of code, you can equate it to the ABC that we just saw in the previous example, and all those listed on the right hand side, say DEF, PQR, XYZ, all those are parts wherein ABC are accessible. I mean, ABC would be going or showing enough. So that means where and all this data item are known. He would be known in his friend circle, in his residence, with his relatives, right? And then with the with where he would be in his workplace also. Okay, in his work culture also. So these are the places where this particular person would be known and also reachable. So similarly, the data item, whenever the data item is used in a program, we have to see in which block or in which construct this data item is going to be used, and based on that we would be suggesting where this data item would be known, to what range it would be known, okay, and where and all it can be accessed. So that's all with the scope rules. Now we are going to learn what exactly is scope is with regards to variables. Okay. So next what we are going to see is scope of variables or the data item. Okay. Parts of the programs within which a name. Now what does a name suggest here? The name is actually suggesting about the variable, right? Parts of the program within which this name is legal, accessible, and accessible. Okay, now we are talking about the legal as well as the accessible nature. When all these both are together following, we say that this is the scope of the name. Okay, now so what does scope define? It defines where and all it is possible. Okay, where and all a name or a variable is usage is possible, where and all it can be accessed or used. Okay, so the two kinds of scope in Python are global scope and local scope. Now, the literal meaning of the words, right, global and local, it's the same thing that would be carried over when you consider the scope of the variables in the language Python too. Now, let's see them in detail. See here, global scope. Now, what is the word, literal meaning of the word global? Say around the globe, right? So similarly, let us take or map the little meaning to what is going to be defined in the language Python. A name declared in the top level segment of a program is said to have global scope. Okay, what is it? A name declared in the top level segment of a program. Now, what would be considered as your top level segment of a program? It would be naturally your main program, right? Or the main function, right? So the whatever in the main can be considered to have global scope, or whatever you are using inside the main program can be used in all other functions or any other places, including the main function of the same program. Is the idea clear? So when you consider the top level segment, it should be the main part of your program or your main program. Okay. And anything that would be there in the main program is believed to have global scope. Okay. Now it is usable inside the whole program, which is usable. The global scope, it can, that means it shows that the usage can be done inside the whole program, starting from your line 1 to the end of your program, and all the blocks contained it. If you're saying from line 1 to line n or the end of your program, that means whatever blocks you is contained inside the program, inside all those things, the name is accessible, right? A global variable is a variable defined in the main program. So this is what you meant by the top level segment. Is the idea clear? Now let us see what a local scope is. Okay. So a name declared in any function body is said to have a local scope. Okay. So whatever was there in the main program, if it was under the global scope, now whatever functions that you're using inside your program, okay, these are tiny, tiny fragments. Now whatever you're using inside, those functions would be having a restriction to be existing inside that function only. Hence the name local. Is the idea clear? A name declared in any of the function body. So it can be existing only inside the function body, right? So it is said to have local scope. Now where and all it is usable, usable only within the function and other blocks contained in it. Now suppose a function can have a nesting, that means a function can contain a function inside it, and in that case if that is a variable or a data item in the function, then it can be used within the function and all the blocks contained in it. So a local variable is a variable defined within a function, and a local scope can be multi-level. That we'll be looking into in detail in the coming slides when we learn about the name resolution. Okay. Now, to better understand the local and global scope, now let us consider that we have, now this is our home. Okay. Now, I'm very poor in drawing, so kindly excuse. Now, imagine that I have a compound wall here. Okay. Now, here is the public road running. This is the public road. And now imagine that here there is a gate and this is a gate. Now you have a private road running here. Now inside this you have so many villas. Now other than me, many are also staying here. Now in this case, now this is a private road with regards to this villa, right? Or this residential area. Now what would happen? This public road is accessible by anyone, right? But see this private road is going to be accessed only by the people who are going, who are either staying here or coming to visit or something like that, right? Not all public would be accessing it because you have a security, you need to furnish your details prior to entering this private area. Now, this is how the global and local scope is also defined here. Now, when you're considering the public road, it is something like a global scope wherein everybody can access it. But when you consider this private area, you can equate it to our local scope wherein only the people inside the villa or people connected with them can be using the private road which is plying through the villa. It is purely privatized and hence can be equated to the local scope. Okay. So I hope the idea of global as well as local scope is clear. So let's move in. Now, I've given a very small example for a code fragment. Now, this code fragment would tell you, this is just to make you understand which among the variables would be in local, which among would be in global. Okay. Now, all these things. Now, let us start analyzing our program from the main program, right? Now, where exactly your main part is going to start from NO1. Why? Because this is supposed to be your statement 1 or line 1. Now, Python, what it does when it is trying to execute, it would start with the first line naturally. Then it would come across the keyword DEF, right? When it sees the keyword DEF, it would understand that this is the, yes, this is a point where the function definition is going to start. The function definition is going to start. So what would it do? It would just check the function header and ignore the body of the function. Okay. Now what would Python do? It would start hunting from where exactly your main program is going to start. If it has not encountered any other keyword and then an identifier, it would understand that this is where your main program is going to start. Now, what is being asked here? You are supposed to enter two numbers and the numbers entered would be saved correspondingly to NO1 as well as NO2. Okay. Now, we are going to invoke or call the user-defined function sum. Okay. By passing these values as parameters or arguments. Is the idea clear? You have read two values here, NO1 as well as NO2. Now these values are passed to the user-defined function sum. Okay. Now what would happen whenever a function call is encountered? Python would naturally transfer the control from this point to a point where the function is defined, right? So when it comes here, what would it do? It was coming along with the values NO1 and NO2. So here the X would be replaced with NO1 and Y with NO2. Now all these things we had seen in the previous class and how the function call happens, how is the value being returned. Okay. Now we saw this too. In this place it would be there. So the result would be copied. The Z which is returned from the function would be copied to your variable result. and then it can be printed on your screen. Now we had seen all these things, but why are we looking into this particular example here right now? Actually, we are learning the local and global scope, right? So let us first identify the variables or data items here. Now we have NO1, right? NO2, and then we have the variable result. So these are the three variables. But when you look into the function, you have X, Y as well as Z. Okay. Now, as per the definition, what is coming under the global scope? Anything that is defined in the main function would be having what scope? It would be having the global scope, right? So these variables can be used anywhere inside the program, starting from line 1 to the last line of your program. Is the idea clear? So all the variables that are used in the main program or in the main function is supposed to have the global scope. Okay. Now then what would be the ones that having local scope? The ones that are defined inside the function. Now what is your function? Sum is your function. What are the variables inside the function? You have x, y and z. Okay. Now x, y and z has a scope starting from the function header till the end of your function. Is the idea clear? Yes, Bikash. Yes, Mukesh. Hello, good evening and welcome to my class. So, back to our lessons. I told you that x, y and z are local variables because it is defined inside the user-defined function sum, right? So what would happen? It would have a range or accessibility only from the function header till the last statement of your function. But when you consider these three variables, what are they? NO1, NO2 and result, they have a global scope, and all those that are defined in the function has a local scope. Now, how did we identify this? Identified by the definition that we saw in the previous slide, right? So let us see. The explanation says, as per the definition, we could say that NO1, NO2 and result have a global scope and hence they can be called as the global variables. Is the idea clear? Yes, thank you. So the variables NO1, NO2 and result are having the global scope. Why the global scope? Because they're defined in the main function, right? Now since they're defined in the main function and they're having the global scope, we call them as the global variables. Now what would be with that of x, y and z? X, y and z are defined in a function, user defined function sum, right? So since they have a local scope meaning a scope only within the range of the function sum, they are called as local variables. Okay, is the idea clear? So the global variables and the local variables. Now see this. Now this is a figure to illustrate the global and local environment. Now the global environment with respect to your program, okay. Now this is actually the main program. Now inside the main program you are trying to access the function sum, right? Since you're trying to access it, the sum would have thank you again. The sum would have a local environment inside your global environment, right? Now, consider the variables inside the function sum. Now, this would have an accessibility only within the ellipse that is shown here. Okay, so you have a local environment and you have a boundary for that. Now, inside the boundary, you have the variables x, y, and z. Now, what are x, y, and z? That are the variables that are used inside your function sum. Is the idea clear? Now, all these variables have a lifetime or have an accessibility only within the boundary of the function sum. But see here, NO1, NO2 and result, the variables have a global environment. Now, since it is residing in the global environment, it can be accessed throughout this ellipse, right? Now, throughout the ellipse meaning, the ellipse is your main program, okay? So this is how it would be looking like. I mean, the scope would be looking like. Now we have separated and told what is a global environment. Now from the previous example, which all variables would be coming here, and naturally what is local environment, and which all variables inside the function would be coming in the local environment for the variable sum. Okay, sorry, for the function sum. I'm extremely sorry. Now suppose you are having more than one function. Similarly, inside the entire global environment, you would have a differentiated local environment for each of the user-defined function. Is the idea clear? Suppose, now in our previous example, we had only one function, say sum, which was accessed by the main function. Now, if you had another function, say diff, okay, let me name the function as diff. So again, which is going to be used in the same program, then it would have another local environment inside this global environment for the function diff. Okay, so let's move on. So variable defined outside all functions. Where are you from? I'm from the south. Okay. So variable defined outside all functions. Now let us see the example here. Now outside all functions meaning it is actually defined prior. Okay, prior to even starting of the program. Now say I have defined a variable x here at the start of your program. Is the idea clear? At the very start of your program. Now x and assigned a value 5 to it. Okay. Now I'm trying to define a function f1 and I have the function body. Now we'll come to the function body later. And what is this? This exactly is your main program, right? Just a second. Let me erase some part so that this would be a little more clear to you. Okay, fine. Okay. So you had a global variable x, okay? You had a variable x which was defined outside all your functions, and then you had a user-defined function f1 which is taking a parameter. Now, what is the value inside the function header b is called? It is called as a parameter, right? We saw that in our last class. Now, this is your function body wherein you have a computation, and then after the computation the computed result is being returned. Now this is the exact point wherein you start with your program, right? Main program. Now what is the main asking you to do? You have to enter a number which is converted to integer and then saved to the variable y. And then you have a computation saying y plus f1 of x. Now this is an expression, and inside the expression what do you have? You have a function call. Now what is f1 of x? F1 of x is actually a function call, right? Now what would happen when there is a function call? The control gets transferred here at this point, right, where the function is defined. Now what does the function do? It would substitute a with the value of x and then the computation would be done, right? And then the value would be returned and it would be in place of f1 of x. Now what would happen? This value and y's value would be summed up and stored in z, which you would be printing. Now this is what your program is telling. Now let's see. Suppose I'm entering a value 9. Okay. Now this 9 is for the variable y, right? Now after reading, what is the next statement? The next statement is actually a computation statement. Now what does a computation statement do? You call f1 of x, right? Now f1 of x means what is x? Now the system starts hunting for the value of x, but in the first statement itself it had encountered the value of x, and what is the value? 5, right? Now this particular function would be called for the value of 5. Now the function would be called here. 5 plus 1 would be computed, and what is the value of B? 6, right? Now 6 would be returned here. So the calculation would be Z is equal to 9 plus 6, right? So now what would be Z? Z would be 15, and when you try to print Z, 15 would be printed. Now what is the understanding that you got here? If you have a variable say X and it is defined outside all the functions prior, okay, now this is going to be treated as a global variable. Is the idea clear? This is going to be treated as your global variable. And this is why when you encountered a function call by passing the argument X, the system of language Python did not have any confusion. Instead, what did it do? It substituted X with the value, the global value, and then the entire function was computed. Is the idea clear? Is there any doubts regarding this? Then you may please post it in the comment section, in the chat. I hope this is clear. So shall we move on? So to better understand this, we were telling that for any variable that is defined outside the function, outside all of the function is considered to be a global variable. Now let us have another example. Now I have a global variable x which is assigned the value 5. Okay. Now this being the function header, in the first glance Python is not just going through the function header and ignoring the function body. Now here is where it is going to encounter your main program. Okay. So while the value is going to be read from the user and then print of x. Now what would be the print x do? It has to print a value, right? Now it has to print a value. Now to print this particular value, system will try to find out where exactly x is. Okay. Now to understand x, x is a global variable and what is the value? 5, right? So this particular value would be printed here. Okay. Now I'm going to assign the value of x as 1. Is the idea clear? After this, I'm going to assign the value of x as 1 and then I'm going to print x. What would be the output? Whether it would be 5 or it would be 1. Okay. Now, is that going to confuse you? Just a second. Okay. Now you have another value assigned to the variable x and then you're trying to print x, right? So what will happen? Okay, we'll just hold on the result or output for a sec and then we'll go through the program and then we'll discuss the output, right? Now z is equal to y plus f1 of x. Again, you have a function called, you're calling the function f1 using the value x, okay? Here again, you need to understand which value of x would be taken. And after all the computation, you get the result in z and which is going to be printed on the screen, right? Now, let us understand the outputs. Suppose the first thing that would be asked is y, right? Enter a number and then when you're entering 2, it will be substituted to y. Okay? So, the value that you are entering would be substituted to the variable y. Next, you are going to print x, right? Now, what is x here? The only accessibility to x is the global declaration or definition. So what is the value expected here? 5, as we discussed again, because this is defined outside all the functions. Now see here, x is assigned 1 here. Okay. Now again, the x here in your main program is going to be a global variable again, right? So what would happen? You had a prior assignment for the global variable x stating that x was 5 and in due course of time you changed the assignment to 1. So what would happen? The 5 would be replaced by 1, right? Now if you try to print x, which value would be printed? Since the 5 was replaced with 1, the value printed would be 1 here. Look, it would be printed 1 because it is defined in main. It is not just because it is defined in main, because both the variables were global, okay, and the new assigned value would be taken. Now, when you're trying to call or invoke the function f1 using x, what would happen? Which value would be printed? So, the which value would be printed? Um, f1 would be invoked with 1, okay. So in the place of a you would have 1, so 1 plus 1 is 2, and b returned would be 2 here. So 2 plus y, whatever value you entered in y, that would be summed up, and then z would be printed, okay. So look here, so that was 2, and plus 2 would yield you 4, okay. Now this is computed by assigning x is equal to 1. Why? Because the prior assignment of x is equal to 5 is being reassigned as x is equal to, by reassigning x is equal to 1, okay. So moving on. So I hope the idea with the global variables is also clear to you. And then now let us introduce a term. Now what does the term say? Lifetime. Okay. Lifetime of a variable. Now what is the literal meaning of the word lifetime? What is the literal meaning of the word lifetime? Can anyone tell me? Lifetime means the entire time period during which a thing or a being has life, right? Where and all it is having life. Now, what are we talking about? We are talking about a variable, and then we have prefixed the word lifetime with the variable, right? So, lifetime of a variable means where and all the variable has life, from what point to what point, okay? The time for which a variable or name remains in memory is called as the lifetime of a variable. Is the idea clear? So the time for which a variable or a name remains in memory is called as the lifetime of that particular variable. Now, when you're considering the lifetime, definitely you have to learn the lifetime of a global variable as well as for a local variable. Now, let's see this lifetime for a global variable. Now, I told you when something is declared globally, it can be used everywhere, right? Everywhere in the sense, everywhere inside your program, right? So anything that was written inside your main program was considered to be that having global scope, right? So the lifetime for the global variables is your entire program run, okay? So from the moment the program takes birth till the moment the program gets flushed out of your memory, till then all the global variables would have a lifetime defined. Clear? So the time for which a variable remains or a name remains in memory is the lifetime, and the lifetime for a global variable is your entire program run. So as long as the program is running, okay, as long as the program is live in the memory, the global variables are also live. Now when you consider the local variables, the lifetime for local variables is their functions run. Okay. Now that means in which particular function this particular local variable is residing. Now as long as that function is being executed only for that period of time, the local variable would be prevailing, or it has a lifetime only for that period of time. Is the idea clear? The lifetime for the local variable is their functions run. So in which function this particular the local variable is defined or declared, only inside the function it is having a scope as well as the lifetime. Okay. Do not confuse the terminology scope and lifetime. Scope speaks about something different and lifetime speaks about the longevity or the time period of existence. Scope is where and all you can use it and the reachability of a particular variable. Okay. So I hope the difference between the terms lifetime as well as Scope is clear to you. So let's move on. So the next topic is name resolution. Uh, Name resolution. So what is the meaning of this terminology is it means resolving. What is to be resolved here? You're trying to solve something. Okay, you're trying to solve the scope. Okay, you have a name means definitely the name is going to be an identifier, right? Or it can be a keyword also, right? So these are the only possible names that you would be using in your program, either an identifier or a keyword. So the identifier or keyword is supposed to be your name, and resolving the scope means you're trying to solve and find out where and all the particular name of the variable or function or whatever be you are using in your program is reachable and where and all it is accessible, where and all you can use it. Is the idea clear? The scope refers to the usability, how at what extent you can use it and where and all these names are going to be involved. Yes, Mukesh, listen to the class. So when you access a variable from within a program or function, okay, how is the name resolution done by Python? Is the idea clear? Next, we are going to see when you access a variable from within a program or a function, we are trying to, Python follows a resolution rule and we are going to learn the rule. Now, what is the name of the rule? See here. The name of the rule is LEGB. Now all in capital letters. So that means each of the letter indicates some word. Right now let us see the word. L indicates local, E indicates enclosing, G indicates global, and B indicates built-in. Is the idea clear? So LEGB rule. This is a rule that is used by our language Python for resolving the scope of a name or the name resolution rule. Now the expansion for each of the alphabets is L stands for local, E for enclosing, G for global, and definitely B for built-in. Now we have just referred the names. Now let us understand this in detail with the help of examples. Okay, so let's see this. Now prior to learning with the examples, we need to learn what exactly is the rule, right? And after the rule, we'll see the example so that we understand this rule better. Now since we had how many alphabets were there? We had four alphabets, right? Now the four alphabets were L, E, G as well as B. Now, when you consider all the four, based on all the four, we would have each of the rules stated. That means something connected with L or your local environment, something connected with E or your enclosing environment, and then something connected with G and your global environment, and finally B, that is a built-in. Oh, I forgot to make it bold. It's okay. So it first checks within the local environment. So what happens is when a name is encountered, a variable name is encountered by the language Python. So I told you the name can be the name of any data item. It can be a variable, it can be a function or anything. It can be an identifier or a keyword also, right? Name can be anything, right? So what happens is when a particular name comes, it first would check which environment, the very close environment with which it is related to. So imagine that it is inside a construct. So what would it do? It would definitely check the immediate environment. Immediate environment is nothing but your local environment. Is the idea clear? First checking is always done in your local environment, or it is also called as the local namespace. Is the idea clear? So the first checking happens with the local environment or the local namespace. Now, if it has a variable with the same name, now since Python has encountered a name, now it's going to check with the local environment and see whether a variable with the same name has been defined here. Now, if it finds a variable with the same name, what would happen? Python uses it. Because there is no confusion, you have already encountered it, so you can use it directly. Okay. I'm sorry, am I not audible now? Hello? Can you give me a thumbs up in the chat so that I get assured that you can hear me? Okay. So yes, so I think there is some problem with the connection at your end, Mukesh. Please check your connectivity. Yes, thank you, Ash. So first the checking happens with the local environment, right? So the immediate neighborhood where you are residing, you will first check there. And if you find it, you can use it directly, right? But if you fail to find it in your local environment, that means the searching has to go on, right? Now from the local environment, it would be moved out to the enclosing environment, okay? Now the enclosing environment again is another environment uh, wherein I mean inside this only you come up with the local environment. Okay, so local environments, imagine that there is a boundary wall, and immediately outside the boundary wall is your enclosing environment. Okay, now you go check your enclosing environment. What happens if the variable is found in the current environment? Then there is no issue, Python can use it. But if it is not found there, then it has to repeat finding higher enclosing environment. What if you are having nesting of functions? Okay, what if you are having nesting of functions? Imagine that in that case the innermost function would have a local environment for itself. So let us imagine I am having two functions, say f1, okay, and inside f1 I am having another function, say f2, okay. So when you're considering the environments, what happens is F2 would have a local environment, right? Imagine this is the local environment of F2 and you have something like this, okay? Then you have F1 now, which is the function in which F2 is contained. So I can write F2 and then I can have an ellipse like this, okay? Now this would be the local environment for F2, right? So what happens is, suppose you encounter a variable and Python first check with the local environment of F2. If it finds that it is not there, then it has to go find in the enclosing environment, right? And if it is not there, and imagine if it is contained in another function, if so, then it has to check the another enclosing environment. But if it doesn't have and just an enclosing environment, then it has to skip and go for the global environment. Now what is the global environment? Wherein the main function, okay, now whatever you have defined in the main function would come in the global environment, right? Not only in the main function, but we also saw that all the variables that would be declared outside all functions prior to your program can also be treated as the global variables. Now in this case, it would check the main program's environment, or which is the global environment. Now again, if it is found, there is no error and it would use it. But if it fails in local, if it fails in enclosing, and if it fails in global, and it is then it comes to the conclusion that this is not at all an identifier. Is the idea clear? This particular name is not an identifier, but it is going to be a keyword, right? So do you think you can find a keyword inside the local enclosing or global environment? No, right? Where would it be? It would be in the built-in environment of your language Python. Is the idea clear? It would be in the built-in environment of your language Python. So Python checks the built-in environment that would contain all built-in variables and functions of Python? If yes, it is used, okay? But imagine that it has failed in all the four environments. It's neither in local, nor in enclosing, nor in global, or in built-in. So that means it is neither an identifier nor a keyword. Then do you think it is a proper name which could be used in your program? It was not used anywhere. What would it do? It would definitely cast an error. Okay, if it couldn't find anywhere. Okay. So I hope the LEGB name resolution is clear to you. So the first checking happens with the local environment and then the enclosing environment. Now all this is enclosed within the global environment. So this would be checked. All the three checks go wrong, then you have to check the built-in environment. And if you cannot find, if at all there is a situation, if you cannot find in all the four environments, an error is getting cast. Clear? So with respect to the LEGB rule, what we are going to do now is we are going to learn a few cases. Okay. Now the cases are learned via examples. I have listed code fragments here to better understand. Oh, I'm a bit sorry. When I copy pasted this, see the DEF, it had to start from here in alignment with the letter N. Okay. Now please bear with the mistake that have happened over here. So variable in global scope but not in local scope. So what are we going to learn now? The variable in the variable in global scope but not in local scope. Now let us understand this. Now starting from line 1, you have a function definition. What is the name of your function? Sum, right? Upon encountering the keyword def, you understand that it is a function definition that is going to follow. So what Python does, it would just check for the function header, ignore your function body, then finds the main function. Okay. So the main function here, NO1 and NO2. Now what is going to be done here? We are simply reading two values from the user. Now the values are numbers. Okay. Anything read using input function. The input function, the default return type is what? It is string, right? What is expected here? A number is expected. So what has to be done? It has to be typecasted to the form that you need, right? So it will be changed to the data type int and then saved to NO1. Is the idea clear? So this is how the number reaches NO1 and NO2. Now I told you this is your main, right? Main program. Okay. So what happens here? NO1, NO2 and result. What are the variables? NO1, NO2 and the variable result. Since they are in the main program, they have a global scope, right? So what would be the environment? They are in the global environment. So let us consider this as the global. Okay. Now, what is happening? You have a function call here. Upon encountering the function call, control gets transferred to this point or your function header, right? So x would get the value of NO1, y would get the value of NO2. Now your local variables becomes x, y and s. Why? Because x, y and s is defined inside your function, user defined function sum, right? So these are going to be your local variables. Now you're going to, what are you going to do? You're going to sum up whatever is in x with whatever is in y. Now in x, which value would be coming? The variable in NO1. Value in the variable NO1. What value would come in y? The value in the variable NO2. This would be summed up and stored in S. Let's see here. You have a print statement inside the sum function. What is it trying to print? It is trying to print NO2. Now, is NO2 a variable inside your user-defined function? No, right? Where is it? It is defined in the main function. Now, what will happen? When Python encounters this print statement, what it does is, It would first check the local environment. Where is the local environment? Now it is residing in sum, right? It would go check the sum's local environment, and when it checks, it is not going to find NO2. Now what would it do? The immediate enclosing environment, since you're not having any other function, is the global environment, right? So it would go check the global environment. Yes, it has found NO2. Now what would happen? This particular value could be printed in this place, okay? And then the computed sum is being returned at the point of call, right? So whatever value you have in S would be returned here, exactly here. This would be copied to result and that can be printed. Now, when you try to run this program, what would happen? You would be asked for, you would be prompted for two values and then you would be entering 1 and 2. Now, what would happen? Upon encountering the function call, you have to print NO2. Now, what is the value in NO2? That would be printed here, right? Now did you understand how does Python resolve the variable NO2 or the name NO2, which is having a global scope here, okay, and not a local scope. Fine, and then I'm going to print the value of the sum. Okay, so this is how the value is getting, or the name variable is getting resolved here. Now we were checking the case variable is in global scope and not in local scope. Okay. So this is the environment. You had the global environment in which you had NO1, NO2. Now suppose I entered 1 and 2 for the values. What would happen? NO1 would have the value 1, NO2 would have the value 2, and then you had the invocation for the function sum, right? Now this is the defined local environment for your function sum. You had two values x and y which was mapped to NO1 and NO2 respectively. So the values in x and y would be 1 and 2, right? Now what would happen? Computation and storing the value in ISIT. So what is the value in z? Z would have 3, right? Now this value is going to be copied to result. Now when NO2 printing happened inside this function sum, right? So first it would go check this local environment. It is not found here. What would it do? It will go check the global environment. Yes, it is found here in the second attempt. Okay. So this is how the value would be printed on the screen. I hope this is clear to you. See here, this is how the 2 was printed on your screen. Okay. So moving on. So let's see the next case. Now what does the case say? The variable is neither in the local scope nor in global scope. Okay. Now in this case, you encounter a variable and then the value of the variable cannot be found anywhere. What would be the result? The result should be error, right? So let us understand this with an example. You have a function greet inside which I'm going to print something. Now what am I trying to print? I'm trying to print the word hello followed by a variable name. Okay. Now and then in the main function, so this is exactly going to be a main function. Inside the main function, I'm going to invoke or call the method greet. When I'm calling the method greet, control transfers to the function definition, right? So print hello and see this variable name. So what will it do? It starts resolving, right? Resolution, name resolution. Now first it will check for the local environment of greet. Now is there any variable defined with the name? No, right? It cannot find it in greet. So naturally it will go find in the global environment. Global environment also failed. No other environment is here. So what would happen? It could neither find in local nor find in global environment because these are the only two possible environments here. Now what would happen? If in no case it could find in any in the LEGB rule, what would be your answer? The answer is error as the name is not defined. Is the idea clear? So this is how you end up in an error. So I hope the idea or the case in which you couldn't find a particular name or you couldn't resolve a name either in the local or global scope, and how things would enter. Okay. So imagine every time the checking happens starts from the L or the local, and then it would extend till built-in. And in all the four cases, if it is not found, what would happen? Error would be casted. Here also it happened the same way. Check with the local environment of your Greek. Okay, first the local environment, then it checked with the global environment, the main function. In both the places it couldn't find. Then even Python checked with the built-in environment, and in all these cases, the answer was no. And definitely, if the answer is no, even in the last stage, what would be the result? The result should be error. Okay, so moving on, let's move on to the next case, that is the case 3. You have the same variable in local scope as well as in global scope. In the previous example, what we saw a variable which we couldn't find either in the local or global scope, right? Right now, what we are going to do is we have the variable with a name, and this variable name is appearing inside a function as well as in your main program. So this is going to be the same variable with local scope as well as global scope. Why? Because when you're defining inside a function, it is supposed to be having local scope. When it is defined in the main function, it is supposed to be having the global scope. Clear? So let's see this. So we'll first understand the program, then we'll look into the result and understand why this happened like this. Okay. So we have a function defined here. Use a defined function. What is the name of the function? State1, right? Now the function is going to be defined, and this is the function body. Now inside the function body, you have a variable tigers. Okay. Now what's the value? 15, right? And then you're trying to print tigers. See the main function, the actual execution happens here, right? Because why? This is your main program. So the actual execution happens here. Here the value tigers is assigned to value 95, and then you're trying to print the value of tigers. So once tigers is assigned 95, what would be printed here? Definitely 95, right? Because this is the global variable and only that value would be printed inside your main. Now next you're trying to call the function. You're trying to invoke the function state. What happens? Control gets transferred at this point, right? Okay. Now what would happen? It would go inside. Now here is tigers with the same name, but how would this tigers be treated? This tigers is local to your function state, but this tiger was a global variable. Is the idea clear? Two variables would be treated differently. And when you're trying to print tigers inside your function, where are you trying to print? You're trying to print the variable or the value of the variable tigers inside your function state. What would happen? Only the local value would be printed on screen. Now, what is the value associated? It is 15, right? So, this particular value would be printed on the screen. Is the idea clear? Okay. When you're trying to print it inside a function body, what happens is the value inside the function is only accessible, and that particular value would be printed on screen. Okay. Now, after the function invocation, you're again going to print tigers. Now, this local variable started at the function definition, ended at the last statement of your function. So, you're not going to access the value 15 anywhere outside this function. Is the idea clear? Okay. So, what happens when you're trying to print the value of tigers even after your function call? What would happen? It can access only the global variable. So 95 is printed. So I hope the output is clear to you. If you're having any doubts, please you can post it in the chat section, or if you want some time to understand this and then come back to me, maybe at the end of the session we can wait, or maybe in my next class also. Okay. So the value of global variables is printed in the first case. In the second case, it was accessed inside the function state, and hence the local value is printed, and later on the value of the global tigers is printed as 95. Understood? So this is a case when you're having a same variable name in the local as well as global scope. We also saw a case in which you have a variable which could be neither found in the local scope nor in the global scope, and ultimately not in the built-in also, and it ended up in an error, right? So moving on. Now, see, suppose you wanted to have an access, use a global variable inside the local scope. In that case, Python provides you the provision. I mean, Python helps you to do that also. You just need to understand this. We are not going to learn in detail because such a thing is also provided in the language. You should be knowing that, right? It is nothing but using the keyword global. Okay, how is it? Using the global statement. This is how the syntax of using it. You just need to write the global and followed by the variable or the variable name prefixed with the keyword global. Now what does it do? The global statement is a declaration which holds for the entire current code block. So in the previous example, if you wanted inside the function also to be the global scope, you could have included the keyword global prior to the variable tigers here. Is idea clear? Then what would happen is later on this particular value of the tigers would be treated as global if you had included the variable global here. So after the function call, again, if you were trying to print tigers, what would the value be printed on screen? The value that would be printed on screen is 15, because then 15 or the tigers variable were treated as global if you had prefixed the word global here. Okay, and this is how the same example would change if you had used global. Okay, so you could change also using the global statement, right? So with this, we have come to the end of today's session. If there is any doubt, you may please post it in the chat, and I think I can wait for a minute more if you have any doubts. This could be clear too. So to summarize what we have seen today, we had looked into the scope rules. Okay, so the different scope rules telling where and all a variable or a data item is accessible, the usability range, etc. Okay, we started with the rules, then we defined the scope. After defining the scope, we also learned that there are two kinds of scope in Python, which are the local as well as global scope, right? And then we came across a term, lifetime of a variable. Okay, so lifetime means it is nothing but it is considering the longevity of your variable, right? So how long your variable is surviving, or which and all area, at what boundary can you access the particular variable, right? When you consider the scope, you considered both local as well as global. We had explained it via examples, okay, using an analogy so that you could understand it better. Later on, we saw the lifetime of a variable, followed by how to resolve the scope of a name and what did Python use for name resolution. It used the rule LEGB, okay, wherein each of these letters uh, the stood for something, wherein L stood for local, E for enclosing, G for global, and finally B for built-in. Okay. And how is a name resolved? It would first check in your local environment. If it is not there, if it is present, it would definitely use. If it is not present, it would check the enclosing later on to global. Whenever the answer goes no or false, It would move on from local, enclosing, global, and finally to built-in. And if at all it has not found in any of the four environments, what would happen? Python would cast an error. So these are the things that we saw in today's lesson. And with this topic, chapter 3, that is your functions in Python is completed. We'll move on with the questions, discussion of questions in the next classes. We'll have a same class running for the same topic in the Unacademy app too. So those who have missed can reach me out in the app for the same lesson. And we'll be coming, maybe probably we'll start with again Monday in YouTube again with the next topics, question paper discussion. Okay, so shall I wind up? That's all for the day. If you have any doubts, you may please ping me in the chat. Okay, I can wait for one more minute. So I hope this topic is clear. So before bidding good night, let me remind you of my promo code SLYT, my promo code SLYT. This would help you in getting a 10% discount when you're trying to subscribe in the Unacademy. Please go through the plans and please take the subscription according to your choice so that you can prepare well for the CBSE 12th boards. And you can also have follow the Telegram, join the Telegram channel to get the updates of the study materials posted. Yes, Ritik, thank you. Yes, Ash, Mukesh, and Bikash Panda for joining. So, with this, I'm bidding good night. So, thank you and good night.